episode 2, I covered non-telegraphic striking and methods of how you can practice being able to throw strikes without giving it away. But one of the things I mentioned was also this thing that I call manipulating space. And you see this a lot in boxing where people are moving around and they're kind of repositioning their body, but it's not this thing where they're just static with their arms or with their head, where they're just moving back and forth as they bob and weave. So when we're talking about manipulating space, what we're really talking about is kind of moving within the natural range of motion that we have in our bodies, that we can make other stuff work for us without trying to be so stiff. One of the things that I'm going to point out when we're talking about self-defense versus sport fighting, even though I make a lot of references to sport fighting, boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, or grappling arts, those are just ranges of motion and things that humans can do. So to me, there's no difference. Grappling with someone is no different in my worldview of, grabbing somebody by the neck and trying to, choke them out or whatever the case may be, whatever you have to do. To me, it's just fighting. So I don't get wrapped around the axle over that kind of stuff. And you really shouldn't either from a self-defense standpoint. But there are aspects within those systems that are real things that you can make work, but you got to be able to develop your body. A big part of Warrior Flow is we focus on developing people's bodies more than anything else. Techniques come and go. We have nothing wrong with technique and we have nothing against it. You got to have technique. But the problem we see is too many people get wedded to technique and not realizing, once again, that it is you that make technique work and not the other way around. So when I'm talking about manipulating space, what I'm really talking about is the ability we have to move within our natural range of motion within our bodies, to be able to do other things or position ourselves in the fight to make stuff work. So I'm going to go through that in this video so that you can kind of have an idea of how you could practice this to develop the skill for yourself. It's really not a hard thing in concept, but you got to practice it because it's going to make you do things and get you to kind of move in ways you probably haven't moved since you were a little kid. Okay, here we go. When I'm talking about manipulating space, some people call it isolation, and there are different words for it, but it's not a hard thing to do, but people make it hard. But what I'm talking about is within the natural range of motion, as we move within our bodies, within our sphere of influence, we have all kinds of ranges in which we can move. The problem is when you're moving in a real fight, because you don't know what another person is going to do from one moment to the next, you're kind of playing off of the other person. In a real fight, the enemy gets a vote, and there's just no way around that. So the only thing you can count on when you're training is to develop your body as best as possible to move as efficiently and as ruthlessly as you can. And there are things you can practice to do that because, again, the enemy gets a vote. And so the idea is as you're moving with the enemy, you're also playing off of each other. And basically the person who moves better is going to have a significant advantage. The person who's stronger, the person who's faster, the person who's more efficient in movement. You just have an advantage. And in a real fight, you want as much advantage as possible. So within, again, our sphere of influence, basically as far as we can strike with our hands and feet with power in any direction, or within all of this space, all of this range of motion is your space to use as you see fit. And one of the things you want to do is you want to learn to manipulate that space. And the reason is it alters the perception of timing of the other person. When you're in there, say you're a boxer and you're bobbing and weaving, you're not just evading, but you're also creating space for yourself where you need it. But also as you're moving in, you're taking space away from the other guy. You're manipulating that space between you. And so there are things you can do to make that more efficient. So I got over here, one of the ways I do it is kind of an isolation drill to kind of get you started. And that is, I just take one of these weighted balls. And the reason I like using these weighted balls is because the mass of the ball gives you something to work with, gives your brain something to do. And what I do is I take the ball and I first start moving back and forth. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep the ball from moving. In other words, I'm trying to keep the ball as I move back and forth from moving like this. I'm trying to isolate and keep this ball in this place as I play around with the space in between my body. Hopefully you can see that well. And as I'm doing this, I'm concentrating on just keeping my hand in that same position. And then I switch it off to develop the other arm. And as I'm doing this, all of my concentration is on trying to keep this ball here. So what's going on is the muscles that are holding the ball in this position are basically playing off of also the other muscles in the body that allows me to move back and forth. So there's this kind of polarity where I actually have muscle groups working with and against each other in concert to create this effect. And as you get better at it, then you can start moving back and forth, passing around, moving your body different ways. And what you're trying to do is you're just trying to train yourself to be able to move in ways so that as you're moving with another person, should you need to make an adjustment, it's not this static, stiff thing that you always see. I see it all the time, especially in reality-based martial arts systems where the techniques they teach are actually good techniques. Very few, unless they're doing something really crazy, are bad techniques. The problem though is, in order to make those techniques work, you got to develop the body to move better. It's not just a matter of memorizing the technique and practicing it 1,000 times. There are things going on in the body that you got to develop. And so this is an exercise that helps kind of, smooth out those rough patches. And as I go back and forth, all I'm doing is trying to keep the ball here in the same spot as much as possible. And if it moves a little, that's going to happen. But you're just trying to concentrate because you're trying to develop this feel that you can feel internally in your body. One of the things I want to point out is I'm human, you're human. So naturally, of course, you want to concentrate on how this feels to your body. Since we're both human, I can kind of approximate how it's going to feel to you because my body works the same way. But only you know for sure how it feels. So what you want to feel is, you want to feel in here a free, almost liquidy-like feeling in your body. You want to feel your muscles moving. You want to feel your joints working. Because as you're feeling that, you're also then paying attention to what you need to be doing to create this effect. But more importantly, you're training your muscles to be able to move in a manner where, for example, I can have direct contact with another person, and if I need to step around them in some kind of way, I can actually do so without giving away my intention, because it throws off their sense of timing, because I'm not actually pushing them. I'm just using them, as kind of a point of reference. Think of it in the same way when you're walking up a flight of steps and you got your hand on the rail, or down the steps on the rail, right? You're not grabbing the rail with the Vulcan death grip. You just kind of got an easy feel, and you're just using it really as a reference point, but also just to make sure you don't lose balance. But if you do, you can always grab the rail. It's the same feel, because that's the way our bodies work. So what you want to do is go ahead. If you got a ball that you can practice with, I don't care, you can even use a stick. Anything that you could put in your hand that forces you to kind of concentrate on it a little bit, just to give your brain something to do while your body is working all this stuff out. Go ahead, stop the video, and just for a few moments, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, put something in your hand like a ball and practice moving back and forth, even stepping with your feet, switching it off, stepping back and forth, and just really learning how to move like that without the ball moving. And then we'll come back, and then I'm going to show you some other stuff. Now that you've practiced that a little bit, what you should be feeling is, as your body's moving, there should be, like I said, this liquidy-like feeling, relatively speaking, in your body. If you had a weighted ball, probably your shoulder and your arm got a little tired. That's okay, that's normal, but it just shows also too that you are actually concentrating on not allowing the ball to move all over the place. As you do this, then you can practice this not only with your hand, but actually start moving your hand around to different positions and feeling yourself move to different places. As I talked about in the other episode 2, where I talked about how boxers kind of move around, and they're actually not just bobbing and weaving, but they're actually repositioning their head ever so slightly. You can even practice that stuff. But the idea behind this is, as you're practicing this skill, you then want to practice against an object where maybe you're striking and then you're, for brief moments, touching, feeling yourself switch position, hit, switch position, and hit. The idea behind it is you're now moving a little freer, but you're training yourself to be able to make contact, move, manipulate the space in between yourself and the target, and move wherever you feel you need to be. So you start training yourself, because when you're in a real situation, if you make contact with a person and they start moving, no one says you can't step out of the way. But when you have direct contact, you can feel them and you can feel what's going on because of the fact that you're feeling where they are relative to your body. And so it's a skill you can practice. For those who wrestled, you know what I'm talking about. When we used to do the spin drill, you know, you're literally on top of another person and you're touching your chest to their back and you're spinning around. But the other thing is, you can actually feel when they try to move, where you could actually manipulate their body and your body, even though you're touching with your chest, because our sense of touch is just that developed, but you got to practice those skills. So go ahead, finish up, practice moving like this, feeling yourself change position, and just getting comfortable with that. What you're going to find is, the more you do that, the easier it becomes and a lot of fun you're going to have actually learning how to develop this skill. Hey, thanks for watching the video. You know what you got to do. Hit the button below and subscribe.